Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. Small town feel with big time ideas. After all, you are entitled to Brad's opinion. Here's your host, Brad Allard.
Well, another week. One more week until, well, I don't know if you can call it Armageddon for at least half the country, I suppose.
See what happens.
Yeah, we're going to see what happens. No, come on. It's, we'll see what happens. We can talk about that. We have Greg Cooper today. We're going to talk about voting. We're going to talk about the bond issue. He's got his homework there. So I'll make sure he's got his facts straight, I suppose. But we're going to talk about what's happening, not just nationally, but more importantly, locally, about that Johnson County bond and what he sees going on with the property taxes, and also what's going on at the county level. You said you just we were having something at the appraisal district.
Oh, no. Well, Johnson County Commissioners Court today, they had their meeting at 9 a.m. this morning, their monthly meeting. So in October, September to October, taxing entities nominate candidates for the Central Appraisal District Board of Directors. Those are the ones that oversee the Central Appraisal District, hire and manage the chief appraiser. So we're through the nomination process. And today, Johnson County Commissioners Court was able to begin to, so the ballot's final. There's 8 candidates on it. And Johnson County Commissioners Court today was able to allocate their allocation of votes. They have 1,096 votes. So they allocated 834 votes to Amy Lingo. She's a current Central Appraisal District Board of Director. So she is now going to be back on the Central Appraisal District Board of Directors, and then the remainder they allocated to the chairman, Dwayne Golding. So they're off and running to reseat the current Central Appraisal District Board of Directors, and they've done we can get into that too if you want. They've done a really good job in what they've done in a year's time at the Central Appraisal District Board of Directors.
When I was talking to you and with Mayor Fletcher about this, there apparently was some confusion, shall we say, or some issues involved. Are those issues being resolved?
In what respect?
Well, there was some discussion about that maybe some of the tax appraisals for property were not being equitably handled. Is that a different topic entirely?
No, it's so basically, properties are supposed to be appraised annually at fair market value, and there's no question that there's a large amount of discrepancies in some property appraisals.
Can we get to that right afterwards? Because it sounds like you're about to explain it to us, and you might take more than a minute to do it.
It's a complicated thing, sure.
And I got people just dying to hear who the sponsors are.
There you go. Let's talk about them.
Well, you know these guys, okay?
Sure.
Our place, I was there Thursday rather, and it's great as always. I don't think I've ever had even a mediocre experience at our place. Food's great, the service is great, very comfortable. Also, Gina's. Have you been to Gina's yet?
I have.
Yeah, and it's really good.
Really, really good.
And we also have the Gina's voting contest, which if you voted, like you said, I'm going to put you on the list for a $50 gift card raffle. I know Elon's giving away $1 million, but Otto didn't. Yeah. We have Elon fanboy Taylor on the mic here, but anyway, I asked, I know Otto doesn't have quite that much money, but he has a $50 gift card. And right now I have I'm going to guess about 25 to 30 names on the list. So send me your photo. I know we're running out of stickers, so I'll take your word for it. I mean, you're not going to lie about that. So just come on board and vote. And we're going to talk about that later in the show about what's going on in this county about early voting, because it's been unlike anything I've ever seen. And I've been here for 32 years.
And that's great. That's great.
Yeah. So check out Otto's places, either our place or Gina's. Also check out Wild Cigar, another good place to go. And I don't know, Tuesday night next week, you can go watch the returns, and you might need a drink. So,
a couple,
and a cigar.
Hope they're open late.
Well, they usually are during the week. They're not open. I'm not quite sure. I think they close around 11, but, it depends. Like on the weekends, it's a little later. As far as Wild Cigar and Culture, also, I got to say, give them a shout out, Chris and Nathan, because they do a lot of good community-based work. They're always counted on to donate swag to any of these nonprofit functions, and so they're always very helpful about that. So go check them out. Go watch. Well, I don't know watch the Cowboys, but hey, there's college football still. We could do that.
Longhorns looking good.
Oh, we don't use that word on this. No, yeah. You see this hat? All right, all right. Anyway, thank you to them. Also, thank you to our friends over at Southern Gym. They're going to have a big deal on December 5th. They're going to send me the brochure, the logo this week because they're still working on a little bit. But on December 5th, 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock, they're going to have, a jazz trio. They're going to have, it's like a Christmas warm-up event, if you will. They're going to have some hors d'oeuvres from American Revelry. It's going to be very nice. Kayla likes to entertain. She's very Southern like that. That's hence the name, I suppose. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And so you can check that out. Also, thank you to Old Pro Roofing. We might get rain this week. And you're going to find out. Well, it's hope. I how many times have you seen the forecast? Oh, it's going to come down buckets and then nothing. But let's have a good thought. Old Pro Roofing, John Williams, 817-734-2756. You need to know if your roof is leaking, and Thursday is not the day to do it if it's, raining hard, if it rains at all. But just, you need to get it done. And also with the insurance, it's been a lot more difficult dealing with insurance, I'll tell you. I mean, there's a couple agencies that, like Texas Farm Bureau, they're still pretty cooperative, but there's others that I won't mention on the air, but he's told me you got to wrestle them down to the ground. So there you go. Also, Jeff Kelly at the Wethington Agency, 817-781-0546. Also, Jeff at jeffkellyrealty.com. He was on the show last Tuesday, and we were talking about what's going on with the rates, which it may go down on your CD, but it's not going down as much on your mortgage. But they would tell you, get the home you want because you can always refinance. And that's not a bad thing. And a lot of these companies are, encouraging you to do now, and they'll give you like some sort of benefit later. I don't know which ones personally, but that's what he told me in general, that sometimes that happens. So anyway, Jeff at 817-781-0546. Also, Local Life Magazine will be coming out next week. Had a big pub crawl on Saturday. I haven't heard from Tiffany yet, but I will. I've sent a message to her. I want to find out how it went. I'm sure it went fine. But anyway, Local Life Magazine will be out in your mailbox probably Saturday or at the very latest a week from today. Also, we got the Toys for Tots thing. Do you still have that loaded up back there? There we go. I had a couple of, you're never a former Marine. Marine's no longer on active duty, right? Mike Perdue and Jack Matson, and they're doing the Marines Toys for Tots. And it's going to be a really big deal. You should start seeing boxes in various places. I know Auto has them. I believe Wild has them, but that's just who I know. But I know Old South, that's another place that has a box. There's going to be drop-off boxes everywhere. And so this event's going to take place at Burleson Stadium. I still call it Elk Stadium, by the way. Burleson Stadium on December 5th. They're going to have not just, drive by and throw toys in a box or whatever. They're going to have performances by both the Centennial and the Burleson High School dancers and singers. And they're going to have young men from both schools, young men and women from the athletic teams helping you with unload your gear. So it's going to be a big event. It's over by the stadium. So you could do both. Go, go by and drop off a toy, then go to galas or vice versa. So there you go. I think that's it for the nonprofits right now, but who knows? There's a lot going on. But anyway, let's go back to what we were talking about the inequitable, or at least what has been considered to be inequitable appraisals, and what's the status of that.
So, excuse me. Basically, the Central Appraisal District is supposed to appraise every property every year at fair market value. So you get your appraisals in the spring. They come out. They're based on January 1st. So there is a little period of time. You start getting them in March usually. You have a time to appeal and go through this process. But what we found out is that there's a large amount of properties that they've not even changed the dollar within a decade. And then there's also another large amount of properties that out of proportion increased in a year over a 2-year period. So basically, the Central Appraisal District, who's responsible for all the properties in their footprint, there's a check and balances called Property Value Evaluation Study that is done by the Comptroller's Office. School districts get involved a little bit with this, but mainly they basically are doing a sampling of a very small percentage of properties in certain price ranges in areas. Their sampling sizes are really, really small. And as long as that sampling size kind of falls between a 95 and 105% range of what the local Central Appraisal District says, they get kind of a thumbs up. But that leaves a whole large majority of properties that can go unaffected each year. So now nobody can say why some of these appraisals haven't gone up in a long time, or why some of them went up out of proportion. Whether it's laziness, whether it's lack of attention to detail, whether there's some malfeasance involved, whether it's just clerical errors or whatever it is. So no one's making any allegations at this point about why, but there's no question that this is real and that it's a pretty large amount of properties. And how we found this out was we were at Keene City Council meeting, and we were addressing the City Council of Keene to they were calling a vote of no confidence in the past practices of the appraisal district due to inequities involved with appraisals. And one of the current sitting city council members was related to a former Central Appraisal District Board of Directors whose son is on the school board. So you have the son on the school board responsible for budgets and tax rates, mom on the city council responsible for budgets and tax rates, and father had just been removed from the Central Appraisal District Board of Directors. So we wanted her to recuse herself because the vote was basically against the reign of her husband on the Central Appraisal District as a board of directors. And an allegation was made by another citizen that the son's property value had been frozen for 10 years. Well, we looked into that, and he owns numerous properties, and all but one had been frozen for 10 years. So when you do property appraisals, you basically appraise the property, and that should be the market value, and then you have a land improvement or improvements in land value. So one is the structures, whatever you've built on it, and the other one is the land value. And those two combined make the appraised value. And then any exemptions are removed. If you have an ag exemption, over 65, veterans, homestead, whatever exemptions you have, they're removed. And then you have the assessed value. Assessed value is what you're taxed on. So this land value and the improvement value had not changed in 10 years. So we began to look at a lot of other properties, right, and we found a whole bunch that hadn't.
Is this in the process of being rectified?
It is. They, in fact, the Central Appraisal. This is a very good lean forward on addressing this. So the Central Appraisal District Board of Directors just called for an independent audit of their methods and processes of how they appraise properties to specifically look at inequities and stuff like this. So they are addressing this. They're aware of it. And the chief appraiser is aware of it. And so we'll see what comes out of it.
Well, I just got my Scott Porter love letter last week. Yeah.
Good or bad news?
You ever get good news from the tax people? I mean, we overcharged you, and I dropped dead. No, I had an increase in taxes, not substantial, but I don't have a substantial amount of property either. So, so it went up about, I'm going to guess about $250. And,
you got off easy.
I did. And, I got a kind of foot in both camps because being a former public school teacher, that's our lifeline, but also I'm a taxpayer. And I'm not one of these people that resents the tax system because I know where it goes to. But anybody that says they like to pay taxes or think it's patriotic, like Joe Biden said one time, I got to think, he said that about 10 years ago, I remember. I thought maybe that's when the senility started.
Sure.
Because no one likes to pay taxes. But, most people understand why they do, but they want it done fairly and accurately. And
responsibly.
Right.
And responsibly.
Right. Speaking of taxes and the sort, we have that election, the $60 million bond. I've had Victoria Johnson on here. I've had Chris Fletcher, and both of those will be on next Monday, the day before the election, just for one last push. I had Chris Bedeker and the county engineer as well.
He's sharp.
Yeah, and it was a good interview, and there it is on the screen. Thank you. If you want information, there's the QR code. And what I noticed here, they said basically would add about $25 a year to your taxes if you're median house. Now, of course, if you got 20 acres or something like that and a big house, it's going to be a bit more. Now, I'm on the record being supportive of this bond. I've already voted, and I voted for it because I think it's a necessary expenditure, particularly the way Victoria explains it. How do you view this?
So before any, in my opinion, before any citizen should support or not support a bond, they should look at the taxing entity as a whole and ask themselves a couple questions. So a bond can be called by any taxing entity: city council, school districts, counties, water districts, emergency services districts, et cetera. So this is a voluntary adding of debt to who the citizens will be responsible for paying over time. So the first question that you need to ask is, has the taxing entity earned the trust of the public in how they have managed their current revenue, their current expenditures, their current budget, and the current debt they carry, if they carry debt? Some don't carry debt.
Well, they said that the debt of the county is very low, very low per capita.
So that first question, I think that they absolutely have earned the trust of the public. For example, every year since 2016, they have taxed under the voter approval tax rate. So the voter approval tax rate is the highest tax rate that can legally be imposed on citizens without calling a vote of the citizens. And this year, most recently, they adopted a no new revenue rate. And in an inflationary time and in a growing community, that's a difficult thing to do. That really required some sharpening of pencils. That is the commissioner's court recognizing that property taxes and taxation in general is pretty oppressive in Johnson County, and they're doing their part to keep it lower than they need to.
Oh, that's an interesting word, oppressive. Why do you characterize it like that?
I characterize it as oppressive because there is a substantial amount of people that are being forced from their homes, and some taxing entities are assessing out of proportion, out of control debt that will become generational and has no end in sight and is at the top end and is forcing taxing entities to basically either tax at the highest legal limit that they can or call elections to have the citizenry voluntarily increase their taxes. And anytime a taxing entity is consistently leaning on the absolute most that they can tax, I look at that as not responsible stewardship of what is not their money. That's my opinion, but that's how I look at it.
Well, the city council here raised the rate, and, I know these people on the city council pretty well. They'd rather eat ground glass than raise the rates. I know Mr. Fletcher ran on keeping the rates low.
Yep.
And for him to vote for it to go up even 3 cents, I'm sure there was some pain and agony involved in that vote for him, and I know the others as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you talk about these inflationary times and talk about a growing community, but we're talking about two different things, though, about City of Burleson and Johnson County. Sure,
absolutely.
That's two different things, but they face the same pressures.
Yes.
Now, as far as this bond goes, from what I understand, it will enable us to access a lot more TxDOT money over the next few years. Currently, the goal was to provide all that the groundwork, the grub work, the engineering, whatever else, and make them eligible for all these grants, just like Parker County's been doing. They've been ahead of the game, and we want to get ahead of the game.
Correct. Parker and Hood County were both leaned on and looked at as examples for if this would be a viable solution for Johnson County. Both of those chose to go down this road. Parker County's been a little more aggressive than Hood County. Mm-hmm. Johnson County's looking a little more conservatively like Hood County. When I say aggressively, I mean more of like a speed to problem solution. Mm-hmm. Parker County started a little bit more conservatively. They've done 3 of these. The best way that, as far as I can determine how this works, and I've been to multiple bond propositions. I've been to multiple city council meetings where they presented this. There's one tonight at 6 p.m. at Burleson City Council. There's a bond presentation by the county. Is basically so TxDOT will identify that a problem is needed that's going to require some road work. And from that point until there's completion, there's a lot of steps in the middle that need to be done.
Right. What I had to get educated on myself and then educate the viewers when I'm on the show is that First of all, this money is not going to like make Wilshire or Hidden Creek, better or whatnot. It's not those type of roads. Second of all, we talk about these county roads and they're getting beat to pieces. That's not what we're talking about here either. We're talking about the access to the main arteries of traffic in our county, and improving access and hopefully improving traffic flow. And so we spend $60 million doing a lot of the preliminary work, and then we could raise our hand when TxDOT said, hey, we got some money.
Yes.
Victoria Johnson being on the Council of Governments is invaluable, to say the least, because she's in a position, she'll be the president next year.
Yes, vice president this year.
Yeah. And she's in a position to know what's coming and get Burleson in front of the line. But to be in front of the line, you've got to have all of this prep work done. So a lot of people said, oh, thank God they're going to, and I thought this too, but I was educated differently. I thought, oh, they're going to take care of this county road that's in shambles. But no, but doing this and getting TxDOT on board also means TxDOT takes responsibility for repairs and upkeep. And that would free up money to take care of 714, for example, which has become basically a gravel trail from all the traffic.
100%. So what people, the reality of the situation in Johnson County is that we bottleneck into just a few different roads to get to the highways to get up to the Metroplex. So so with all these bottlenecks, you're funneling the large majority of traffic into just a couple of areas to get in and out of Johnson County. This will free up a lot of and make more viable a lot more options to move around in and out of the county. It will save a substantial amount of manpower and labor hours getting from point A to point B. I think incalculable measure of improvement will be the first responder response times that are bottlenecked at certain railroad crossings and at certain times of the day. And the arterial and the feeder roads improvements and the railroad crossings and safety improvements alone are worth giving this bond a valid look.
Well, there's several places I could think of just sitting here, and I've talked about it before, that need improvement. 917's become a nightmare.
Absolutely.
Both going east and west. I go to Dallas once a week, and I go through 67. And so rather than going through that mess down in Alvarado, I usually take 917 and take it like the backcountry way. And now I'm seeing a lot of people on that road, big rigs, construction vehicles, all sorts of things like that. And I didn't see that a few years ago. But apparently 917 is no longer a secret because a lot of people are using it to bypass other areas. And that bridge on 917, that's a mess.
Absolutely. So that's a great example to use of what this bond, let's say this bond had come into effect 10 years ago, might have done. So we waited for that project to get done until the problem, because they're working on from Keene to 35, from like a middle of Keene to 35. They're working on that now.
On 917?
On 917.
Right,
they're working on that now, where that bridge is and stuff. And this bond will allow projects like that to get addressed substantially faster before the problems are so bad that you have crazy gridlock like you do now.
Right. And talk about railroad crossings as well. There's one at Egan.
Egan, that's a bad one.
Yes, and there's one other. Oh yeah, the one on Dobson. You going up Dobson, then take this 45-degree turn right into a rail line, and it's Taylor will tell you how much I enjoy having the trains every half hour here in Crowley. So
well, and what people don't understand is like for example, Joshua's one, the railroad crossing in Joshua. I'm more familiar with that one. That's
one too.
Where I live. But the city of Joshua is never going to be able to financially do that itself. So they're beholden to TxDOT and the Railroad Commission and all that getting on board with solving that problem. This bond facilitates a lot of the heavy lifting in the middle of the identifying a problem to completion to get that stuff front loaded.
That was in Joshua, downtown Joshua, if you will, Main Street, a week ago Saturday. And, just a Saturday, 11 o'clock. I was going to eat in one of the restaurants there with my Sunday school group. And and there were traffic knotted up around Main Street in the railroad crossing.
Absolutely.
Like it's Saturday morning, but I've gone through that more than once. I've never had an easy transition through there. I always had to wait, sometimes through 2 lights, and because of the traffic backup.
I cross that taking my kids to school every day. I cross that, and at least a few times a month during morning rush hour, and I'm going from Joshua into Godly. There's a train that will stop in the middle of the track, and they'll back up 917 coming into Joshua from Chisholm. It'll back up 2/3 of the way, 3/4 of the way to Chisholm.
I mean, that's what happened to us here Thursday. We're doing a Thursday show in the afternoon, and 1:30 a train, right down the block from us here in Crowley, stopped. Now, I don't know how to fix that problem, but I know I had something to say about that problem. Not all of it can be repeated here. I walked in with a head of steam after a while, but also in Crowley is a good example. This bond won't affect Crowley, but when that train comes and stops, this town stops because there's only one way to get from where we're at to the highway, and you have to take like a 5-mile detour through this home development and all this other stuff. That's what this bond is trying to prevent, right?
Yes, that's There, railroad crossings are a big part of this bond.
You got a lot of colored maps there.
There's railroad crossings all over. Godly's another one that they're addressing with railroad crossings, and some of the feasibility studies that they're doing on the west side and south side of town, west side of Godly and south of Cleburne. Some of the railroad crossings there are going to get addressed. And
this is the map of proposed.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, proposed stuff that they want to do with the bond money. Well,
and another thing too that the Commissioner's Court really deserves credit on is in what's not in a lot of their in their bond documentation is they actually did a lot of town hall meetings where they reached out to the public and says, hey, identify the biggest friction points and the biggest points of contention regarding traffic flow, and these proposed projects mirror that. This is the map of it mirrors the entity, the public's input. So the public
had have that on like your phone or something. Taylor could probably put it up if you can email to it.
I can probably get it to him.
Okay.
Yeah. So and this is part of the master thoroughfare plan, which hasn't been. I think it'll be finalized early 2025.
The thing about it is there's a lot of thought that goes into this, and sometimes people think, the taxing entities like Johnson County or City of Burleson resort to bonds.
I just texted it to Taylor.
Okay, you could throw it up there. Yeah. They resort to bonds as a last resort.
Who does?
When I talk to decision makers, the last thing they want to do is pass bonds.
Correct.
Because they know, first of all, it's difficult and it can be divisive to a community. And you're rolling the dice a little bit. They wish they could just do it with their own resources, but sometimes that's beyond it.
So this is another reason to seriously consider this bond. And whether you support this bond or not, the reality is that Johnson County Commissioner's Court could have called a certificate of obligation without public input and assess debt to solve these problems. Based on the current, dissatisfaction with the property tax process and how the high rate of taxes that they're saying, they chose to bring this topic to the voters instead of just doing it. And then a couple years later, when they started seeing progress, take credit for it. So whether this bond passes or fails, whether you support it or not, people should give the Commissioner's Court a lot of credit for how they've rolled this out.
Right.
And
so here it is on the screen what you were showing us. Taylor with his magic got it up there for us. You can see there's a lot of maybe you'd explain that what the legend is for this map.
So this basically during some town halls during the development of the master thoroughfare plan, which is I don't think it hasn't been finally approved yet, but this is where the public reached out to say these are what's going on with the traffic as we see it as residents of Johnson County getting to and from point A to point B. And most of the projects, the substantial amount of projects, they mirror this. So this is, and this is here again, this is representative government listening to the people, coming up with solutions, and then again, bringing it back to the people to finance it.
So the orange exclamation points are points of contention.
Yes.
And then you have, of course, the comment box. I'm sure you had some comments. The red thumbs down, is that, what does that mean in particular?
I can't tell you what each one specifically means, other than this is where they got input from the public. They haven't released the one, like I said, this master thoroughfare plan is in the process of being finally approved, but this is a snapshot of the locations of where the problems were identified.
Well, so that's good. And that's great that they just didn't rely just on their own anecdotal evidence, but they actually got input from people who actually drive these roads. You know, Chris Bedecker was here Thursday. No, I'm saying Thursday. He was here Monday. Oh, Friday. I'm going to get my dates right. I'm getting my dates right. He was here a week from Friday. And, you know, and I was impressed by the fact that they really did take care to make sure that the people knew, had a chance to say what they wanted to say. Now, I will say that, you know, for a lot of people didn't know about this bond until just recently. And I guess we, you know, part of it could be we're all consumed with the bigger election or something like that. A lot of these things go by by our attention, but I think more people are aware of it now. And a lot of it had to do with, I hope this show had a little bit to do with it. Facebook, I'm sure, social media. Your efforts definitely have done it, because I don't know anybody that goes as many of these meetings as you do. You know, you probably see the same crowd, I'd imagine.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
So the reality of it is civic governance is very boring for the most part. It's very monotonous. It is.
It's supposed to be. We don't need drama. We don't need
correct.
We don't need soap opera. We need, the grind of making these kind of decisions.
Correct. And hopefully there'll be a lot of people that show up to Burleson City Council or City Hall tonight at 6 p.m. to learn about this bond. This is I think this is the last big public meeting. But I was at Cleburne Civic Center, and there was maybe 15, 20 people there, and they had room for probably 150. So whether you're a bond supporter in general or not, whether you have made your decision on this, you owe your community the attention to get involved with something like this and to learn about it. So it's really easy to say bonds are bad. It's really easy to say taxation's bad. It's really easy to just stay on the sidelines and chirp about it at backyard barbecues in the water cooler. But get out and learn about it. I'm a bond skeptic. I think that they're easily abused. Bonds are very easily abused by the people that call them. They always want to throw a lot of fancy flashiness in with some serious needs. And this one really doesn't do that. It doesn't do it at all. In fact, you could even make the argument that there should be more solutions in this than there is, if that makes sense.
Well, they're trying to be modest about it.
Absolutely.
$60 million sounds like a lot of money. It is, but for some bonds, I know Parker County's passed a couple of bonds. They're like $250 million or something like that. Very, really high dollar. And we may be heading towards that one day, but we're not the same county that we were 30 years ago when I moved in here. And every time I talk to a city council person or the mayor, and I say, what's the number one problem? It's always the same answer. It's always roads.
Yeah.
Victoria tells me 75% of her complaints on email, or she receives in other form, is about the roads.
Yep.
And it's so I am fully on board with this thing, and I voted for it already. And I kind of want to switch gears. Speaking of voting, let's talk about the early elections going on in this county. I've never experienced anything like this.
No, it's been awesome. As of this morning, I think over 40,000 Johnson County. You can go to the Secretary of State's office and it has numbers, but as of close of business Sunday, there was over 40,000 people that had voted in Johnson County. That's
why you give me
really good number.
That sound for. Taylor hasn't voted.
It's a good sound. That's awesome.
Oh, okay. Is Taylor, you going to vote yet? You going to vote this week?
I haven't yet, but I'm going to this week.
Are you okay? Yeah, you can't get on the contest, by the way. I'm just making sure.
Says who?
Says the contest sponsor. All right. Anyway, back to you. Well, back to you. I've been here a long time, and normally I vote early. Not because I'd rather vote on election day, but Robin works on Tuesdays over at Southern Gym, and she's on her feet all day, and she didn't want to go stand in line. And she gets done about 5:30ish or so. And she'll go over there and stand in line another hour or something like that. So we do it early. And most of the time we walked in and done it early. It's, 15 minutes. I don't even know even that much. I think it takes almost, 10 minutes or less.
Yep.
Well, a week ago today, last Monday, after my afternoon class, we go over to the sub courthouse and they had cars lining the street.
Yep.
And we found a parking spot miraculously enough. And they said, go to the back. It's where the line is. And I'm like, oh, it doesn't sound good. And I walked out and it was out the door and down to the end of the parking lot and back.
Yep.
And so after we went to the store, he said, why don't we try another place? So we went to the Precinct 3 maintenance facility. And that took about 45 minutes. And then we stuck it out for that. Why do you think people are voting early? Is it this election or is it their habits have changed?
I think it's a combination of both. Johnson County traditionally has been a very heavy election day voting. There's So why would you vote early opposed to election day? So voting early, you have the choice of locations you can go to. So I voted in Godley. I live in Joshua. On election day, you're forced to go to your specific place. Mine in Joshua is a large Baptist church, and it is overwhelmingly crowded every election day.
Really?
So for me, it's a no-brainer. Especially considering you can go to other locations. So today at the commissioner's court this morning, they were commenting specifically on the sub courthouse in Burleson about how crowded it was, and they were encouraging people to go to Keene, Godley, or Venus, saying those are the three that are most open. I voted in Godley, and there was a line, wasn't a long one, and people have been waiting for as it opens to get in. This is a great thing. Voter apathy is real. It's been a problem in the past. And here again, we're close to 30% of the registered voters in Johnson County have already voted. That's great. Judge Bedecker this morning said that if we stay on the same pace, by the time early voting's over, if I understood him correctly, by the time early voting is over, we have a chance of surpassing 2020 presidential elections. So that's great. I would rather have most of my wishes via the election process fail with a massive voter turnout than 5-10% voter turnout and get what I want, if that makes sense.
Well, it does. It does. I've said something similar. I'd rather have turnout and a mostly glitch-free process that gives people confidence in the result, even if I'm not happy about the results.
Absolutely.
Because I don't want to win by cheating or win by because there was mistakes made. Now, I'll say every election in our history, there's mistakes that have been made.
Sure.
You have human beings and whatever else. There's a big difference between somebody making a mistake and malfeasance.
Yes,
and so
100%.
I'm not going to go that route yet until I see clear evidence. And I don't mean Sean Hannity ranting on the news. I'm talking about real evidence that something had to happen. I'm going to, what people don't understand about the voting process is every state handles it differently, and what we would consider to be illegal here is legal elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Ballot harvesting is not illegal in Pennsylvania, but it is here. And so people think it should be legal there. Well, that's Pennsylvania's choice and how they run things and that kind of thing. So my biggest concern about this election is kind of what happened last time, is that Mr. Trump will be leading in the battleground states Tuesday night. And then with all the mail-in stuff and all that, the verdict's going to change. And people will not accept that because they're going to assume cheating has been done.
In today's modern times, how we can't get to a very quick outcome. And I think Arizona recently said it might take up to 13 days or something crazy.
And same with Georgia, it'll take a few days. Pennsylvania will be at least a week.
Yeah, and so you don't hear about non-battleground states taking a long time to get to their results. And you have to ask yourself why that's happening. There's no reason to not be able to roll through to get the results immediately following the election. It just makes no sense.
When we were kids, we knew usually by midnight at the latest.
Absolutely.
And, and of course, you and I remember 2000, and all the hair pulling going on there. But almost always, we knew that, Mr. Clinton was reelected, by 10, 11 o'clock that night.
Sure.
Or that, George H.W. was elected about 10 o'clock that night.
Yep.
And, And then, of course, you have the court rulings. We were talking about that before the show about what do you do with ballots received after the election day. In some states, it's okay, but you told me, and I remember reading about it now that you reminded me of it, but the Fifth Circuit Court says they're not valid, but they have to be counted. Something like that. That's goofy, right?
Well, okay, so the Constitution's clear. It says we have an election day. So the question is, well, what happens if you start getting a bunch of ballots after the election day? So Fifth Circuit Court ruled that ballots received after election day are not valid. However, they didn't put in a stop to them collecting and counting those ballots. So what the fear is that you will have ballots come in after election day that will be counted, and that will change the outcome of what happened on election day.
Will they be added to the total if they're considered to be invalid? If they get them like Wednesday of next week, would that automatically invalidate the vote according to this court ruling?
Well, according to the court ruling, yes, but the court is not the one that's receiving and counting. So if the election sites receive and count, and then they add to, and then they call the election a certain way, then you're dependent on, either the Harris or Trump campaign, if it's the presidential election, to then challenge it in court and use the court ruling as precedence. And then it'll get appealed to the Supreme Court, and then they'll have to determine this. But the bottom line is, if the court's going to make a statement like anything received after election day is not valid, then it should also be accompanied with do not accept ballots after election day.
Is it possible they'll receive them and count them and set them aside until a final Supreme Court ruling is made, and whatever the court rules at the top level, either they'll be added in or they won't be?
I think that would be dependent on the states and the Fifth Circuit where this might apply. But
well, it doesn't just apply to the Fifth Circuit; it applies nationwide.
So who knows?
So maybe the Supreme Court needs to step in.
You're the constitutionalist here. You probably know more about this than I do, but
I don't know about that, because you seem to know your stuff pretty well. And I'm always encountering things like this because this is new territory. And what would I think should happen constitutionally doesn't mean that's the way a judge is going to see it.
No, and I think the court system in general, the legal system in general, over many years has become very gray in so much as there's so many things that are process driven and not merits driven on the outcomes that it's, I don't know, it's a little touchy to me, the legal system.
My personal opinion is that I think the Fifth Circuit Court's opinion is correct, but that you're right also that they should have put an enforcement mechanism in that statement. But if they had come up with the other side, say, well, no, the postage stamp or postage mark shows an intent to vote, and they got it in on November 5th. If they'd have ruled that way, I don't think I'd have gone crazy either.
No, if it would have been, if you would have done it limited it to postmarked, I could have understood that.
That's what it was. But what I understand also that they'll take it in Pennsylvania post election day postmarks.
Well, and
that's wrong. That right there, that doesn't make any sense.
Nobody wants to disenfranchise voters, and everybody wants every vote to count. But they've made it so easy in modern times to get out and vote with the substantial amount of time for early voting, with absentee ballots, and with numerous locations on election day. It is not hard to vote, and it takes minimal effort. And considering the blood, sweat, and tears over the history of our country that's gone to secure the right to vote,
which you were a part of back in. How many tours did you have? 3?
I have 5. How many deployments?
Yeah,
8.
8. Well, you paid your ticket,
5
didn't
just
you?
to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So you hear a lot of people frustrated with having to wait an hour. It's okay. Get out and vote. Do your civic duty. Especially if you're going to moan and groan about the outcomes, or things not going your way. At least have a little bit of skin in the game to do it. But it's not hard to vote in today's world.
It's ridiculously easy.
It is. It really is.
And that's why I think any post-election day postmark should be invalidated, because it's not like they had no opportunity, particularly in states like Pennsylvania. They've been open having early voting and mail-in voting for 2 weeks longer than we have. And,
Sure.
In Florida, I think they started the last week of September.
Yep.
The ballots are getting mailed out and on and on and on. Speaking of mail-in ballots, you voted many times, I'm sure, in foreign locations with mail-in ballots.
Absolutely.
My concern has always been, how do they account for security and authenticity of the ballot? So tell us how that works.
So it's supposed to be signature verification when you fill out your voter registration card. You sign that, and it's supposed to be signature verification. How they actually do it, I don't know. There's already been, and I'm going to probably use the incorrect legal term here, but there's already been like voter problems with ballots that they found out that hundreds of ballots filled out in the same handwriting, the same signatures didn't match, and all that. So I voted numerous times while deployed in the military. Our station, if you're stationed in Fort Drum, New York, and you're a resident of Texas, you can't necessarily fly back to Texas to vote. So voting absentee in the military and do a mail-in ballot is very common in the military. It's encouraged by the chain of commands. It's not hard to do.
Well, I do see the possibilities of, not so much malfeasance, but mistakes. All right, I'm trying to avoid getting into that paranoia of this is going to be another stolen election routine, because as much as I didn't really care for the outcome that much, I think it was fairly handled. All right, and the truth is, I don't ask people how they vote. This election for me was really, really hard in certain elections, and in certain spots on the ballot, my wife and I left it blank. And that's all I have to say about that. But I'm just saying that it's been really tough to see. Really, both sides have done it. I mean, they try to invalidate Trump's 2016 with all this inference about Russia and blah, blah, blah and whatnot, and cheating here and there. And then 2020, obviously, we saw all the business on January 6th. I just want to avoid all that again. And I'm afraid the losing side will not accept the verdict.
Well, I think this goes back to hanging and pregnant chads.
Right. Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Gore Bush
I remember that very I talk about that in my government class about, because they talk about the role that Ralph Nader played in the third party and how he kind of threw a curve and all that. And, most of my students now, even the adults, they were children when it went on. They didn't care or know. And some of my students weren't even alive then. Yeah. But it's still, that's my concern. And when Rob and I left the ballot box, we voted for some of the down ballots, but some of the other votes, or lack of votes, shall we say, we didn't leave with the usual good feeling one gets when one votes. I know for a lot of people think that's kind of corny, but I always enjoyed voting. I thought it's the ultimate common American experience. Everybody voting, right? Not everybody goes to church or likes baseball. For God knows why they don't like baseball. But we have all these different interests. But that's the one thing we have in common is the voting. And normally I leave feeling pretty good about it. I did not leave feeling good about having to leave certain parts blank or others. I did feel good about voting for the bond. I had no problem with that at all. But the other parts, it's what's happened in our system. It's been very tough.
Yeah, and I think. Just looking at the ingrained now two-party system and how we're really bottlenecked and limited to options on a lot of ballots, and I think that's a little bit disheartening sometimes.
It is, and again, I teach this in my class. The advantages of the two-party system aren't quite the same as they were, say, 30 years ago, and because normally you had a winner, Republican or Democrat, holding that seat, et cetera, et cetera. And we didn't have these coalition governments like you see in Italy and stuff like that and whatnot. But now, because the parties aren't anything like what they used to be. They don't have any control over their own members in terms of who runs. So that's why you get far left and far right, as opposed to back in our day, so to speak. If you wanted to run, you had to somewhat be in the mainstream, right? Now we get,
I think
some of these people are just nuts.
Well, I think a lot of it nowadays comes down to money. I think there's way too much money in politics. I think there's way too much money.
Yeah.
and too much influence. You can take matching funds. Nobody does because there's more money to be made by PACs and donors.
Oh, sure.
Nowadays, I think it should be mandatory to do the matching fund thing. So so candidates are given a set amount of money, and that's what they run on.
Well, that's kind of what they do in Britain.
Yeah,
they basically say when the government calls an election, they have 5 years to do it. So they don't have it like every 4 years like we do. So they may call an election after 3.5 years if the party in power feels like it's to their advantage, or 4.5 years. But they have a 5-year limit to do it. And so basically, they'll call an election. They have 30 days, and the parties get the money. The candidates themselves do not raise individual money.
Yeah.
Now, all that being said, sounds great. It'd be tough to square with the First Amendment, which courts have ruled that money donations is a form of political speech. Yeah. So and so I don't know if they would be upheld, but it sounds good on paper. So how would you like to have just a 2-month election and the money's already set? Each candidate gets $50 million or whatever, and blah blah blah, and off you go. But no. Ms. Harris has raised $1 billion since she was declared the nominee, and
then
wow,
going back to the process, like how and I'll make no bones about it. I'm not a Harris supporter, but how she got the nomination is completely backwards for the process as it's intended to work. I've received as many delegate votes to be on the ballot as she has.
Yeah,
if
right.
you want to get,
right.
In primaries. So
that is a problem. And tomorrow I have Brandon Crisp on the show, who ran for city council, and I hope he runs again. He may have a little bit different perspective, but from my perspective, again, this is why they say you're entitled to my opinion. I have serious concerns about Ms. Harris.
Oh yeah,
and
I do.
I really do. And it's not because I'm a big Trumper. Because most people that know me kind of. My Republican conservative relatives are kind of irritated with me that I'm not more MAGA than I am. But that's no big deal. But the point is that Ms. Harris gives me great concerns.
Oh, she should.
And, and not be, and this other stuff, well, you just don't want a woman president. That's rubbish.
No, that's,
I voted for Nikki Haley in the primaries.
Yeah.
And so that's rubbish. And as far as like, oh, you don't want a woman of color. Well, in today's society, that's to me not noteworthy. That's beside the point now. We're already past that point where the race of the candidate makes a difference.
Other people don't get to define for me why I support or don't support a candidate, and they love to do that. Yeah. If you want secure borders, you're a racist. If you disagree with transgenderism, you're a homophobe. You don't define why I vote for something or why I support something or not. But people always want to define motives of other people,
right?
To justify why they're not having the same support that they do, and that's wrong. Well, people should be entitled to their opinions.
And I do believe her own words to me concern me more than what is said about her is what she said herself. This idea that she's now not opposed to fracking and never has been opposed to fracking. That's rubbish, right?
Yeah, she's wishy-washy.
Yeah, and we talk about, she's not in favor of all these things. And yes, 5 years ago you were, and we have the tape to show it. This isn't an inference we're making. Here's you in your own words. And I think those ads that Trump is running where she is being quoted on tape are very effective.
Well, I'm 100% okay with a politician over time evolving their position, but they need to be able to quantify and justify and dictate why they did that, opposed to avoiding that they ever had the previous opinion.
Exactly, and that's what's happening.
She's not doing that.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happened. Oh, I never said that. Oh, that's not what I meant. My values haven't changed. Well, but your views have, and that's obvious. Now, of course, on the other hand, just for equal time, Mr. Trump does make it hard, doesn't he? Sometimes with some of his statements and some of his actions.
I'm not a fan of a lot of the Trump's rhetoric. I think he managed the country pre-COVID very well, and really did an awesome job. I think that he chooses to pick too many verbal battles that hurt him more than anything else.
That was my biggest complaint when he was president: was stay off Twitter, and all this other stuff. And that was, and now I have concerns about, if we want to talk about policy, I have concerns about that too, because I think this tariff idea is terrible, because that's going to raise the cost for a lot of people that support him.
I don't want to by any means claim to be an expert in international trade.
Yeah.
But I understand the reasoning on why it could be good, and I understand the concerns in it. So I'm not well versed enough in international economics to really dive into that.
Well, I taught AP economics. Does that make me an expert? That's not the same. My concern is though it'll cause a trade war and such. But on the other hand,
but aren't we in a trade war now?
yeah,
I mean,
right.
so
you're right.
yeah. If the field was level now, I can see the concerns a lot more. But I don't think the field is level now, and the incentivization to take manufacturing and production out of this country right now is serious.
Like a John Deere.
Like John Deere,
Yeah.
that they're a great example, a recent example.
That really stuck in my craw.
Yeah, so I can understand the tariff issue and how it will work. I can also understand that there will be some industries hurt by it. How it plays out long term and if it can be done in a way that yields the positive results. I think let's look at, whether it's legislation or whether it's executive orders that lead to that, and see, the devil's always in the details, right?
Well, people are
so let's see
concerned.
what it actually
Yeah.
comes up with. It's easy to say tariffs good, tariffs bad, but let's see how it's laid out and what it's going to actually do.
I guess so.
If that makes sense.
No, it makes plenty of sense. It's good sense.
Well, like the 89th legislative session coming up for Texas, school choice is going to be on there.
It's going to be all day, all the time.
Sure. And until we have a bill in front of us to evaluate, nobody should be saying, unless you're just absolutely anti or absolutely pro. But there's things in there that I would support, and there's things in there that are absolutely non-negotiables that I won't support in it. So I think like the tariff thing, you got to see what the devil in the details are and actually what it's doing or what it potentially can do and designed to do.
Well, right now those
you can
details
evaluate
aren't even being discussed. It's just
No, it's
Mr.
too
Trump.
macro of a policy.
Yeah,
right now.
just Mr. Trump making statements.
Yep.
And that's it. There's no percentages or details or who it's going to affect and nothing. Just him making statements. And,
100%. I do think that we have become over reliant on imported manufacturing goods and production goods. We know whether it comes down to our silicon chips, our drugs and medicine, and things like that. So I think there is a very strong case to make that we are very over reliant on imported goods at this point, almost dependent, if not dependent, in some industries.
It's ringing true with a lot of people in the swing states. That's for sure. Because I would have lost a lot of money, or I might lose a lot of money on this election. I got a bet with my cousin. Might cost me a couple of I'll tell you afterwards. No, it's a couple of bottles of tequila, and doggone, my wife doesn't know that, but she didn't listen to the show. So, I'm glad you brought up the perspective because that's the kind of conversation people need to be having.
Sure, it's not as simple as cut. It's cut and dry.
This is the kind of conversation that across the country we wish people are having, as opposed to yelling at each other or assuming that the person that doesn't agree with you is just beneath contempt. And that's been another terrible thing to see. You and I are old enough to remember, not all elections are Sunday school parties. We've seen a couple that are pretty lightweight, but they were saying mean things about Mr. Reagan, right? And all this other stuff. And they were saying mean things about George H.W. Bush. I mean, that's holy cow. He's probably one of the most decent gentlemen we ever had.
Yep.
But so, politics ain't beanbag like Ted Roosevelt once said. But still, it doesn't have to be like this.
People need to analytically, logically, and emotionlessly analyze political, the foundational grounding of a candidate and their stances, and then hold them accountable and leave emotion out of it. There's too much emotion in politics today. That it makes it hard to, and then too much ego too. There's nothing wrong with supporting a candidate now, and if they change where they're at, pulling support down the road. I think a lot of times too much we get married to a candidate and we ride or die with them,
Right.
or a policy or a party. I think probably more a party.
More of a party.
We are not the Democrats, like Kennedy Democrats. It's come along. Liberalism's come a long way since the days of Kennedy and stuff. So.
I there's a couple of candidates in my 40-year voting history that I really liked personally. I'm a big Reagan fan, even though my son would disown me for saying that. But I understand. I don't get attached emotionally to the people I vote for.
Should not. Yeah. It's bad business.
I had no problem voting for John McCain, but I wasn't like, a big McCainiac, as they called him at the time, or Romney. I didn't have any problem voting for Mr. Romney, but I wasn't like emotionally vested in Mitt Romney.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way it probably should be. All right. Well, anyway, we're running out of time. We could do this all afternoon, but I have a class this afternoon.
There you go.
Yeah, no, I got to teach American government. I'm going to teach electoral college today to a bunch of excited students, and they're going to, I have had foreign students in my classes, and trying to teach them the electoral college. They're looking at us like, hey, yeah, kind of like that. They're like, what? What a crazy system. But anyway, tomorrow I'm going to have Brandon Crisp on. We're going to have this kind of conversation again. You may have a bit of a different perspective, but I'm sure it'll be quite an entertaining show. Let's see. Next week, Monday, I have, like I mentioned before, the mayor and Victoria Johnson. We're going to talk about mostly about the bond and also city issues. And then I believe Thursday is just me ranting about the results. So I don't know.
The ones you won't have yet?
Well, that's going to be part of my rant. Is like, this is ridiculous, and it's damaging the country to have our results being drug out for 2 weeks.
It is.
And so, anyway, thank you, Taylor. And
always.
All right, and be sure to share this with your
Burleson
friends.
City Council, 6 p.m. Learn about the bond.
All right, that's put that on your party to-do list, and we'll talk to y'all tomorrow.